Welcome into the DFS Den. It's Dave Eddy here, aka Corporal Eddy on Twitter. We're back here for week 9 NFL DFS. I cannot believe we're like halfway through the regular season already. It's been crazy and it's been chalky. Man, it's hard to have all this chalk keep hitting. I guess it is what it is, and move forward with the way we've been playing, and eventually that chalk is going to bust, and we're going to be right up there, hopefully near or at the top of these MMEs. So let's go ahead and hop into things. We always start at quarterback. We're going to start with cash as always, and for cash I'd like to go from most expensive down to least expensive. So we start off with Josh Allen, $8,500 on DraftKings, going up against the Jets. Guy that's always in play for cash games. Bills have got the highest team total on the main slate by quite a bit as well. Dude's averaging over 30 DraftKings points per game. Really, the issue with Josh Allen just comes down to his salary. The way it sits now, I find it hard to fit him in. Just, when I say the way it sits, I just mean like the slate as a whole. Find it hard to fit him in. I really can't blame anyone who goes ahead and jams him in anyways and just kind of figures out the rest. It certainly can be done. And I imagine that, some more value will creep up later. So we'll probably make it even more viable, but, you never can go wrong with Josh Allen and cash. Matchup is completely irrelevant there. We go way down to the only other guy that I'm considering at this point, Justin Fields, $5,300 going up against the Dolphins. This is, it's usually in cash. It comes down to, a guy that can run. I played Sam Ehlinger last week. Now, part of it was because he did have a bit of a running floor, but, it was more the $4,000 salary is what it was. Fields is only at 53. Obviously, $1,300 is a lot, but that's pretty cheap. And it's pretty cheap for a guy that, he's got 6 games in a row with at least 47 yards rushing, 3 straight games over 60. So he's getting it done. He's going to get you points on the ground. You can pretty much rely on that. It's just what he's going to do with the arm. That's the concerning part. During the last 3 games here, he is averaging 11 rushes and 76 yards a game. So, you're getting like running back, production here out of your quarterback. So like I said, whatever he throws, for is going to be, I wouldn't say gravy on top because you need the points. But you've got a nice built-in floor with the rushing game. He's got 7 rushing attempts every game so far this year. So for a quarterback, that's fantastic. And he's been throwing the ball a little bit lately. So he's thrown the ball at least 21 times in each of the last 5 weeks, averaging 23 passes per game during that span. So that's not a lot. Quarterbacks nowadays are throwing twice that, relatively often. So it's not like he's throwing a lot, but the point is he's throwing more than he was to begin the year. And he's running the ball better. So I don't know if the offense, is just, more tailored now towards, Fields and that's where we're seeing, this, or if he's just improving overall as a player. Either way, as a DFS player, I really don't care. I just like to see it. And he's got a good matchup here going up against the Dolphins, team that, has got a lot of injuries in the secondary. So that's just going to help him in the passing game even more. And this is a team that's already been ran on this year. So Lamar Jackson got over 100 yards and a touchdown against them. Josh Allen, almost 50 yards on the ground against them. So, I expect more of the same from Justin Fields. And at that price tag, $5,300 on DraftKings, I'm feeling like that might be the way to go, barring, a major change here with, some value popping up, which is certainly possible. For MME, again, we start with Josh Allen. He's going to be an option every single week so long as he's healthy because his ceiling is unmatched. Just the type of player he is, the offense he's in. He's always going to have, a high ceiling and going to be an option. Again, same thing with cash. The only worry really is the salary. And of course you also got to worry, are the Jets going to push the Bills enough for Allen to score enough points to, pay off that salary. So, realistically, you get 25 points from him. That's your 3X. You want more like 30 or 40 from him, which is absolutely possible. But combination of salary, obviously, and are the Jets gonna make him play a full 4 quarters? We'll find out. Next up, Aaron Rodgers, 5,900 going up against the Lions. QBs have just feasted against the Lions this year, and it's something Rodgers has done his entire career. But we've seen how much he's been struggling lately. And let me tell you, this is the kind of game where you break slumps. Going up against a defense like the Lions, I can see why Rodgers is going to be so popular this week. I'm going to feel a lot better if Allen Lazard is out there on the field and healthy. If Allen Lazard is not going to be playing, I probably just avoid the chalky Rodgers here, and I'll just look to go elsewhere. Even with Lazard in there, though, in this great matchup, and to be honest, a pretty low salary, $5,900 for a quarterback isn't much. Just because of the lack of weapons he's had and how much he's been struggling, even with a great matchup like this, I think I'm just going to look and find success elsewhere at a much lower ownership. Next up, Trevor Lawrence, $5,200 on DraftKings going up against the Raiders. Matchup of all matchups here. Raiders have given up the most points to QBs all year. This defense is so bad that I played some Davis Mills in tournaments a couple weeks ago because of this matchup. And it's coming in at just 5.2K. So for that reason, I think he's going to catch, the eye of people. Matchup and the price are things that really are going to stand out. He's got fairly obvious stacking partners as well. You got Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and then you got a way to correlate a very, very shitty tight end position this week by stacking him with, Evan Ingram. And that's a very viable play, on its own, but even better whenever you could pair it with Lawrence. Even with this matchup, though, he's still a volatile play, because he has been so up and down, all year long. But he's someone you definitely got to keep in mind here. And the bonus, he makes for some really nice leverage off of some ETN chalk, which we'll get to a little bit later. And the last guy I want to talk about here for quarterbacks, Joe Burrow. He's coming in at $6,600 going up against the Panthers. And he is coming off an absolute stinker against the Saints. Boy, that was not pretty. And the question that you really need to ask yourself, before you consider playing Burrow this week is, was that stinker because Jamar Chase was out, or was it just a bad game? That's really what it comes down to. For me, I'm willing to bank on the talent here. And it also doesn't hurt that stacking him is very easy. You're going to have very condensed targets between Higgins and Boyd, and then you can even mix some Mixon in there as well as a solid option, for a double stacking partner. And Mixon would allow you then to basically soak up, all the touchdowns in that offense. So I think it's interesting. It's not expensive at $6,600, compared to Allen's $85, but there are certainly much cheaper options. And again, it's a slate where we need to save salary, but Burrow and his stacking partners should allow you to still build relatively well. Let's go ahead and move on over to running backs. Again, we start with cash. I go from high price to low. We start with Austin Eckler, $8,800. So, coming in on the high side here, going up against Atlanta. He's expensive, but his workload that he's going to receive in this game should make it worth it. One of the higher totals on the slate as well. And as tough as it is to eat that salary, it probably isn't going to be too good to pass on. Mike Williams is going to be out. Keenan Allen is very questionable, even after coming off of a bye week. If Allen misses the game, I probably just lock Eckler into cash. If Allen plays, then I guess you do have a decision point to make. Aaron Jones, $7,400 against the Lions. Lions are giving up the second most points to running back so far this year. Last 2 weeks so far, Jones has seen 18 and 25 touches. And I just expect that, Jones is going to see a lot of touches again this week. And a lot of that's because, he's so heavily involved in the passing game. And Lions are also allowing the most rushing touchdowns in the league. So, pretty good chance he's going to fall in the end zone this week. And you should see, a pretty decent score from him. Joe Mixon, kind of talked about him a little bit when I was talking about Burrow. But this guy's volume has been absolutely elite. And that's been regardless of game script. So he leads the league with carries inside of the 10-yard line. So, touchdown upside. Third in total touches. Third in running back targets, and fourth in rushing attempts. So that is what we're looking for, in cash. We're looking for guys that get a heavy volume. And I mean, that's what, Mixon is. Now the points haven't reflected that as well, as we'd like to. But with that workload, he is exactly the kind of back that you want, especially in cash. And kind of considering the options this week and where his price tag falls, I think he is borderline a lock in cash for me this week. And the last guy we're going to talk about, again, I kind of talked about him a smidge earlier, Travis Etienne, $6,300 going up against the Raiders. Since James Robinson was shipped out of town, Etienne has been, one of the best running backs in DFS. Granted, it's been a small sample size, but my God, has it been impressive. Over the last 2 weeks, he's been on the field for, about 80% of snaps, and he's got about 88% of the carries in that backfield as well. And he's very involved in the passing game, as we expected. He's got an 11% target share. Wouldn't mind seeing that a little bit higher, but with how many carries he's been getting, I don't know that you can expect a whole lot more out of him, but there's no competition either for touches. So, whether they were to be ahead and needing to, run some clock, he's going to be your guy. If they're behind and they need to, pass and play catch up, he's going to be your guy. And, he gets a great matchup here against the Raiders defense. Allowed 5 opponents in a row now to go over their implied point total. That defense has just been bad. So even though the Jags offense hasn't been on fire, we can see, that the Jags might well just do better than, what we expect to see them do. And, Raiders have allowed the second most receiving yards per game to running backs and the 7th most points to running backs this year. So, Raiders have been giving up all over the place. They're someone that we like to attack. And at $6,300, on this week, again, ATN, man, it's going to be hard not to play him. It's even though there's not a lot of great, running back options, so to speak. It's looking like probably another 3 running back week as usual. Not a ton of guys to choose from, but you certainly can make it work. And that's where Justin Fields kind of comes in over Josh Allen too. Is it kind of makes all of that obviously work a little bit better. So let's go into MME. And here again, MME, I kind of go down by ownership. So the guys I talked about first, expected to be higher owned and, less ownership as I work my way down. Just for anyone who's new here, which by the way, if you are new here, go ahead and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Turn on the notifications so you can get an alert every single time a new video comes out so that you don't miss it and you get it while it's fresh. And then go ahead, drop a like down here for me. Let me know that you're enjoying the content and that, you're winning cash right along with me here. But anyways, back to MME. Josh Jacobs, 7,300 against the Jags. He had 3 straight 30-point games before a complete dud last week, but all the Raiders, were a complete dud last week. Gets a slight price drop as he had been steadily just rising. And he's going up against, the team that's given up the 5th most points to running backs this year. So definitely a path to success for him in MME if you want to go that way. And then a couple of guys here. Again, ATN and Jones. I talked about them for cash. Jones, again, crazy ceiling here just because of how involved he's probably going to be against that terrible Lions defense. And then ATN is basically just getting every single running back touch that there is against a terrible, defense. So 6,300 for ATN again, 7,400 for Jones again. And then I'll just cover the other 2 guys that are on the list, even though there is a guy sandwiched in between them. But just to rattle off the guys again that we talked about in cash, Eckler at 8,800, Mixon at 65, just elite volume. So, guys that you definitely have to consider playing because they're going to touch the ball, so often. And then the last guy I want to talk about here that we didn't talk about for cash, Ramondre Stevenson, $6,200 going up against the Colts. 5 of the last 6 weeks, he's returned at least 3x value, and that's something that when I'm deciding on my player pool for tournaments, a big part of that is, do I think this guy can 3x his salary? So in this case, he would need to get you 20 points to do that successfully. And he's a guy that looks like he's probably going to get a lot of touches. And so long as he gets himself into the end zone, I think he can get you the 20 points that you're looking for. So another guy there I'm considering for MME. All right, let's hop into wide receivers. Again, we start with cash. Price highest to lowest. Tyreek Hill going up against the Bears. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say about this guy. Historic pace. Might break 2,000 yards. Break where am I at here? Break this guy's record. Calvin Johnson. We'll see. In this offense, he's just been explosive. Even more so than he was in Kansas City. He should be a guy that is a priority to try to fit in this week. It's going to be hard, but again, another reason why Fields over Allen kind of feels right. We got DeAndre Hopkins, 7,900 going up against the Seahawks. Another guy like Tyreek, where the matchup just doesn't seem like it matters. And the Seahawks actually been playing pretty surprisingly good D here lately. We'll talk about them a little bit later on, but D-Hop's been back for 2 weeks now. And those 2 weeks, he's getting an absurd 38% target share and a ridiculous 60% of air yards. So, Kyler Murray is happy to have him back, and he is chucking him the rock. So, he's gotten expensive real quick, but damn, he's worth it. When he's healthy and on the field, no question, absolute elite, alpha, wide receiver. So you can't play all of these high priced guys here. But you're gonna have to decide between Hill or Hopkins. I don't know how you're gonna play both and have a great cash lineup. And you don't have to play either necessarily, but whichever one of the two you decide probably to go with, you can feel comfortable with that selection. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6,600 against the Packers. Cheapest he's been since week 2. So a guy that has seen elite usage when healthy at 6,600, very enticing. TJ Hawkinson, Delta way. He's now in Minnesota. Just leaves more targets, for St. Brown, and he's likely to dominate the targets there. Swift was back last week, but in a very limited fashion. Head coach Dan Campbell actually said that the 5 carries that he got was probably too much. So he's going to be on the field, but not seeing a whole lot of snaps. So, ARSB could be in for a pretty busy day. No reason to expect any less than, 10 targets coming his way. Chris Godwin, 6,200 going against the Rams. Bucs offense has been struggling. Obviously, I think we all know that that's well publicized, but Godwin's still seeing elite target volume. Since he's been back, he came back in week 4. He's had double-digit targets in every game but one, and he's had at least 6 receptions and double-digit DK points in each one of those games. So even though the Bucs struggles, have been again widely publicized, they've still maintained one of the most pass-happy offenses in the league. So I don't really see a reason why that wouldn't continue, making Chris Godwin a pretty good cash option, as he often is. Then last guy I want to talk about, least expensive of the bunch, Josh Palmer. He's coming in 5,100 going up against Atlanta. Like I talked about with Eckler, Palmer is going to be forced here into a huge role. Especially if Keenan Allen misses a game. Either way, Mike Williams is out. Keenan Allen is out. I'm probably jamming it. Well, not probably. I'm jamming in Eckler. I'm almost certainly jamming in Palmer at that point. But even if Keenan plays, I think Palmer is definitely a good option because he does provide salary relief. And what is a really good matchup is Atlanta has allowed the most points to wide receivers this year. So a guy that's looking like, a play for cash this week. I may lock him in. For MME, we got to start off with, Stephon Diggs. Again, I'm going expected ownership high to low. Stephon Diggs, $8,400 against the Jets. He's going to be a chalky stacking partner with a chalky Josh Allen, but he's returned 3x value in each of the last 3 weeks. So, he's an elite receiver. It's kind of hard to poke too many holes into eating chalk here. But the bigger problem that you're going to run into, and the problem that a lot of people are going to run into because they're going to be playing these guys together, is it's going to be hard fitting both of these expensive pieces in and liking your lineup as a whole. So, an Allen and Diggs build is probably going to look, similar because there's not a lot of, savings this week. And so, a lot of guys are going to be gravitating towards the same good savings play. So you're going to have a lot of your spots duplicated, playing that. Doesn't make it a bad play necessarily, but you do need to find ways to get unique while also having to save salary. So makes it tricky, but that's part of the fun of DFS, in my opinion. We got Cooper Kupp, $8,900 against the Bucks. I mean, Cooper is as sure of a thing as they come in DFS, That being said, a hobbled Kupp against a pretty tough Tampa Bay defense in a week where salary is tough makes it very easy to fade him. I'm surprised at how highly he's projecting ownership right now. And that's probably just going to, I wouldn't say fall off a cliff, but it's probably going to drop quite a bit as the week goes on, just because paying up for him is going to be so hard that if he ends up playing, theoretically, it could turn around to be a decent leverage play. But I doubt it. Cooper Kupp usually, holds a decent ownership percentage, even though his price tag is so high, because like I said, he's so reliable. He's so consistent, but I'm probably going to fade him, this week. And it's risky because, we've seen Kupp can break any slate, even if he's hobbled a little bit, but that's where I'm headed. And then I'll mention Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Hopkins again. Again, Hill, $8,500, Hopkins, $79. Just absolute beast wide receivers, massive ceilings. Could score as many points as anybody on the slate. So, guys, you gotta consider. And then Tyler Lockett coming in $6,100, going up against the Cardinals. This is a game that's expected to score some points here between Seattle and Arizona. Lockett's been good all season. He's been a target hog too, as he's got at least 6 targets in all but 2 games, one of which was 5 targets, the other was 4. So, he's been seeing his healthy share of targets, and he's got at least 8 in 3 of the last 5. So, not as many targets as we're seeing guys like, Hill and Hopkins and, what Kupp gets and stuff. But at 6,100, that he's getting great target share. He is questionable at this point, but he's expected to play. And you've got DK Metcalf on the other side of the field, who's even more hobbled. So, you could see an increased workload here from Tyler Lockett, even if he's questionable at the moment. And then I got to mention again, just Josh Palmer, 5,100. Again, especially if Keenan Allen is out, he is going to become extraordinarily popular. But at that price tag, man, it's hard not to play him. You'd like him to have more production, when he's been, seeing such heavy, snap volume. But, I mean, he's going to be popular, so just keep that in mind. All right, let's head on over here to tight end. Tight end is absolutely disgusting this week. We'll talk about a few guys, but it's a paydown week at tight end. But for cash, we'll start with Robert Tonyan, $3,800 against Detroit. Definitely more than I want to pay for tight end this week. Like I said, especially with how weak tight end is. But this matchup against the Lions is great, and so that certainly makes him an option. Lions giving up the 5th most points to tight ends this year, and since week 3, Tonyan's averaging 5 receptions per game, which on a PPR site like DraftKings is fantastic, and his 22% target share over the last 3 games. That's very impressive. So definitely an option in cash, even though we would like to spend less money. Evan Ingram, $3,300 against the Raiders. Over the last 4 games, he's averaging 7 targets for 58 yards and 12 DraftKings points. So we're looking at 4x on our money there at that point. Absolutely phenomenal. Again, it's not the best play in the world, normally speaking, but with how disgusting this tight end slate is, those numbers become even more fantastic. So that's probably where I'm leaning this week for my tight end. We'll see. I mean, it doesn't hurt that the Raiders giving up the third most points to tight ends this year as well. And then I'm going to talk about Foster Moreau again. We don't know that Darren Waller is out at this point. And obviously this play is only if Darren Waller is out. But, over the last 2 weeks, Moreau has barely been off the field. He's got 97% snap rate. So pairs very nicely with his 22% target share. So, those three guys, I prefer an absolute punt tight end like, I don't know, James Mitchell, let's just say, for the Lions. But the odds of him getting you a 0 are pretty high, whereas these guys are going to be involved. So if you desperately need to save $700, $800, I guess James Mitchell's is a consideration, but you got to make that play full well knowing that a 0 is absolutely in his, range of outcomes. And then we'll talk MME real quick here. I'll just start with Tunyon. He's going to be, the tight end chalk this week. That's what kind of a tight end slate we've got. I've already talked about, how involved he could be in this game, in a great matchup. So we'll talk about Tyler Higbee next. $3,700 against the Bucks. He's been amazing this year. Granted, his last 2 games, he's had a total of 3 catches for 22 yards, but he did drop a 60-yard touchdown last week. So, if you would add that into the mix, all of a sudden the narrative becomes very different. And again, like I said, I want to pay down on tight end this week. I want to be able to focus on quarterback, running back, wide receiver. So unlikely that I'm going to be heavy on Higbee, but I can't blame anyone for playing him, as so long as you can make the salary work. Kyle Pitts, 4,500 against the Chargers. A weekly obligation here to mention Kyle Pitts because he's so polarizing. Finally had a stat line last week that, we've been expecting all year. He had 9 targets, 5 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. That's the kind of Kyle Pitts that, people were expecting to see, but that's the first time he has had a game like that this year. They gave him a bump in salary. He's up to 4,500, like I said. I probably wouldn't have considered playing him at 4,000. So at 4,500, he's just a guy I'm going to fade. And again, more than anything, it's just because, I want to pay down at tight end this week. But even so, I've been off on Kyle Pitts until, he's back. I'm going to be late on Kyle Pitts if and when he, comes back. We'll talk about Dawson Knox here. $3,500 going up against the Jets. Again, we've talked about the Bills here a little bit. But he's always a guy to consider whenever, Josh Allen is chalky. And to be honest, when Josh Allen plays, he's usually chalky. Makes for a nice pivot, off of the wide receivers there, and gives you some good leverage, while filling that tight end position. So anytime you can fill the tight end position, with leverage or correlation, that's always the best way to do it. Again, the 3,500 is more than I really want to spend. I definitely, though, in this case, can see paths to it making sense. Tight ends typically are, tight end or touchdown dependent. Especially, when you get down away just from the elite guys. But he scored a touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks. And he's a guy who's known for, scoring touchdowns. So I can see some Dawson Knox this week. And then finish it off with 2 cash game guys that I talked about earlier. Evan Ingram, Foster Moreau. Again, Foster Moreau only in play if Darren Waller's out. Evan Ingram is a guy that I like. He's got a very nice floor. I'm not sure that the ceiling is there. But against the Raiders, they're, like I said, they're bad against, tight ends. So, I don't see him breaking the slate by any means, but can definitely see him 3Xing his salary and making it worth your while. And then we round it out, of course, with defense. So for cash, I'll just make it simple. 3 things I'm eyeing right now. The Buccaneers at 3,000 against the Rams. The Seahawks have been surprisingly good. $2,500 against Arizona. And then the Panthers, just because they're so cheap, $2,300 against the Bengals, who, really struggled last week. And to be honest, Panthers defense has put up decent points. So at $2,300, that's a pretty good price tag. For MME, same thing I've been saying for the last few weeks. My advice right now, basically just, correlate it with running your running backs, or at least use someone that's under 5% owned, and you want them to be cheap. By far the most volatile position on the slate, and I'm talking by an absolute mile. There is no correlation between, the price and how many points they end up scoring, even though, it's based on matchup. Defense is just so crazy. In a perfect world, you play a defense, that pairs up with your running back under $3,000 and under 5% ownership. Currently, I always go ahead and tell you which teams fit that criteria for me during the week. I think the one week we had like 5. I think last week we had 3. This week, Zippo. I don't have anyone that meets that criteria. With that being said, again, everything is slate dependent. So as I'm looking at this slate, I'm just focused on saving money on defense. I want to save money and I want to have as low ownership as possible. I'm not worried about correlation. I just want to save cash and I want to be a little bit on the unique side. That's the way that I'm approaching defense this week. If you haven't done so yet, I mentioned it earlier, but pop on over here, subscribe to the channel. Like I said, make sure you turn on those notifications so you get an alert every time a new video comes out. That way you get everything right fresh, when you need it. And then drop a like on here, and I will see you guys next week for week 10.